On a stifling spring afternoon in the year 1935, an eerie silence settles over the windswept high plains of Cimarron County, Oklahoma. Across millions of acres of flat prairie, the horizon does not meet a blue sky. Instead, a towering wall of midnight black dust rises thousands of feet into the air, advancing at 60 miles an hour. This is the heart of the Great Dust Bowl, the worst man-made ecological disaster in American history. Outside a small wood-framed farmhouse, the sun vanishes in broad daylight. Noon becomes pitch darkness. Inside the house, a family huddles in the suffocating heat, listening to the howl of the wind as fine sediment drives through every microscopic crack in the walls, coating furniture, food, and skin. They are homesteaders who came to the southern plains chasing the promise of golden wheat, only to find themselves trapped in a multi-year drought that has transformed the nation's breadbasket into a desolate desert of sand. This reconstruction of daily life inside a homestead farm during the Great Dust Bowl in the year 1935 has been created with artificial intelligence based on historical diaries, Farm Security Administration photographs, and records of the period. If you enjoy seeing the lost and hidden spaces of our past brought back to life with historical accuracy, take a moment to subscribe to the channel History Reconstruction and turn on notifications so you do not miss the journey still to come. To understand the environment of this struggling farm, one must look at how decades of aggressive agriculture stripped the southern plains of their natural defense. For thousands of years, deep-rooted native shortgrasses like buffalo grass anchored the high plains, holding fragile topsoil against relentless prairie winds. During World War I, soaring grain prices and government drives to feed Europe led farmers to plow under millions of acres of virgin sod with heavy tractors, a speculative boom known as the Great Plow-Up. When severe drought struck in 1931, the exposed topsoil lacked roots to hold it. Deprived of rain, the dirt powdered into fine dust that high winds lifted into gargantuan storms known as black rollers. By mid-decade, over 100 million acres of farmland across Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico were actively blowing away. Standing exposed on the open landscape, the farmhouse is a simple, single-story clapboard structure built during the prosperous 1920s. It lacks trees to break the gale-force winds. Thin pine tongue-and groove siding forms the walls, resting upon basic fieldstone piers. Nearby, a tall steel windmill spins wildly, struggling to pump muddy, sulfur-tasting water from a well driven hundreds of feet into the falling water table. Beside the main house sits a half-buried storm cellar, constructed of poured concrete beneath a thick mound of earth. Built originally for tornadoes, the cellar now serves as an emergency bunker when indoor air grows too thick to breathe. Inside the home, the fight against the dirt is an endless siege that dictates every architectural adaptation. To keep dust out, the family has transformed their living quarters into a sealed bunker. Windows are sealed with gummed paper, newspaper soaked in flour paste, or kerosene-dampened rags stuffed into sash grooves. Wet cotton bedsheets nailed over doors and window frames serve as crude air filters. Despite these desperate measures, fine silt sifts continuously through keyholes, floorboards, and roof shingles. Microscopic grit settles in soft ripples across the linoleum, gathering in small drifts in the corners and leaving a film on every tabletop, plate, and pillowcase. 3 generations often share these crowded quarters, representing the resilient farming families of the American West, whose independence has been ground down by economic depression and environmental ruin. The household typically consists of the father managing dying land and starving livestock, the mother bearing the burden of domestic labor, elderly grandparents, and young children who have known no other reality than dark skies and dust masks. Surrounding them are neighbors in similar distress, bound by traditions of mutual aid and church gatherings. Yet, as the drought stretches into its 4th year, Crop failures force thousands of neighboring families to abandon their defaulted farms, packing Model T Fords to head west toward California. Federal intervention soon became the lifeline for these struggling families under President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Agencies like the Agricultural Adjustment Administration stepped in to prevent total starvation. The family receives modest emergency relief payments and basic supplies: sacks of coarse flour, canned beef, and dried beans. Local county agents visit to enforce programs like the Emergency Cattle Purchase of 1934 and 1935. Federal officers buy starving, dust-blinded stock for a few dollars a head, shooting the weakest animals on site when no grass or water remains. Long before sunrise, daily life begins, though in the spring morning light is often smothered by a yellow haze. The family wakes to the acrid, metallic odor of airborne dirt. Opening one's eyes reveals the night's infiltration. On white cotton pillows, a dark oval of clean fabric marks where the sleeper's head lay, encircled by fine brown silt that drifted through ceiling cracks. Morning routines start with shaking out blankets and clothing, sending clouds of dust into the room. Before stepping out of bed, family members wipe their eyes with damp cloths to clear the crust of dry mud that seals their eyelids shut overnight. Personal hygiene during the dust bowl is an arduous battle against scarcity and grit. Water is far too precious to be wasted on frequent full baths. Every drop pumped by the laboring windmill must be conserved for drinking, cooking, and livestock. A single wash basin of lukewarm water serves the entire family in the morning, with members taking turns washing in order of age. To prevent delicate nasal membranes from drying and bleeding under constant dust friction, family members smear thick coats of petroleum jelly inside their nostrils. When going outdoors, adults and children tie damp flour sack cloths over their faces, wearing clear glass goggles to protect their eyes from blinding grit. At the oilcloth-covered kitchen table, meals reflect both austerity and the constant presence of dirt. Cooking is a hazardous task. If a pot of stew is left uncovered for even 2 minutes, a gray crust of silt forms on its surface. Meals are prepared under damp dish towels. When the family sits down to eat, plates and cups remain turned upside down until the moment food is served. Even with these precautions, every bite carries a crunch. Bread baked from Red Cross flour contains fine quartz sand that grinds against teeth, wearing down enamel over time and leaving an earthy taste in the mouth. Cornmeal mush served with canned milk or thin molasses syrup makes up the standard breakfast, accompanied by biscuits and fried salt pork. Fresh milk and butter have become rare luxuries. The family's remaining cows, forced to graze on dust-choked Russian thistles, produce milk that is thin and sparse. Dinner at noon and supper in the evening feature boiled pinto beans, fried corn cakes, canned tomatoes, and salt-cured meat. On rare occasions, they enjoy a stew of wild jackrabbits. Swarming in plague-like numbers, these rodents devour every remaining scrap of green until local communities organize mass rabbit drives to protect the barren soil. After the morning meal, the father and older sons venture into the heat to perform outdoor labor. The farmyard presents a surreal landscape of buried machinery and dead vegetation. Sand drifts pile against barn doors and submerge wooden fence lines, allowing livestock to walk directly over buried wire. Armed with shovels, the men dig out buried chicken coops and clear dirt from the wellhead. In a desperate attempt to stop the land from blowing, the farmer hitches his mules to a lister plow, cutting deep furrows across dry fields to bring up clods of lower subsoil that can catch drifting sand. Friction between airborne sand grains generates static electricity, adding a dangerous element to daily chores. Atmospheric charges build to levels where metal fences carry currents strong enough to knock a man down or kill a calf touching the wire. Operators of automobiles and tractors drag heavy iron chains behind their vehicles to ground the chassis. Static sparks routinely short out ignitions and ignite dry brush. When two people reach out to touch hands, blue sparks jump between their fingers with a sharp crack. Farmers learn to touch metal tools with a wooden handle first to discharge built-up voltage. Behind sealed doors, the mother and daughters wage an unceasing war against the dirt. Cleaning is not a weekly chore, but a continuous, twice-daily struggle. Armed with brooms and damp rags, the women sweep floorboards, collecting full dustpans of sand from a single room every few hours. Furniture is wiped down, bedding is beaten outdoors if winds allow, and clothing is washed in zinc tubs using harsh lye soap. Washing clothes is agonizing. If garments hang outside, a sudden wind shift coats them in mud or rips them on the line. Instead, wet laundry hangs across indoor rafters. Acting as crude secondary filters, the wet sheets drip muddy water onto freshly swept floors below. For the children of the farm, childhood during this era is shadowed by environmental danger and physical illness. The local one-room schoolhouse sits miles away across open prairie. Walking to school during a storm is a life-threatening ordeal. Children can easily lose their way in zero-visibility darkness, wandering off roads into barren fields where they risk suffocating. Parents attach long ropes between the house and outbuildings so children can navigate the farmyard safely during a blow. In the classroom, students sit two to a desk with slates coated in grit, while the teacher conducts lessons over the deafening roar of wind rattling wooden shutters. Dust pneumonia poses the single most terrifying threat to these homesteads, a severe respiratory infection caused by inhaling fine silica dust. Sharp quartz sediment settles deep within pulmonary tissues, causing high fever, chest pain, and coughing fits as the body attempts to clear physical obstructions. Children and the elderly are exceptionally vulnerable. In the spring of 1935, regional hospitals report hundreds of deaths from the condition, which locals refer to as the brown plague. Mothers spend terrifying nights sitting beside cribs, placing wet cloth tents over babies' beds, and applying turpentine salves to their chests while listening to labored breathing. When a major black roller strikes, normal life comes to a complete standstill. Driven by cold polar fronts pushing south from Canada, these massive dust storms arrive with alarming speed. A clear morning turns into absolute darkness within minutes as a black wall of dirt, 3,000 feet high, sweeps over the horizon. Temperatures drop 30 degrees in seconds. Outdoor workers drop tools and run for shelter following guide ropes back to the house. Animals panic in the open. Cattle choke as dirt fills their lungs, suffocating where they stand. Inside, the family lights kerosene lamps, but flames burn dim and blue in oxygen-depleted air. Sunset brings a brief, quiet retreat into the interior of the home. As the wind subsides, the family gathers in the kitchen, the coolest and most sealed room in the house. If equipped with a battery-powered radio, they tune in for weather forecasts, crop reports, and President Roosevelt's fireside chats. The radio brings news of distant events, New Deal legislation progress, urban economic struggles, and reports of Dust Bowl dirt blowing all the way to the East Coast, darkening skies over Chicago and New York. When the battery dies, the evening passes in quiet conversation, reading by lamplight from the family Bible, or mending worn clothing. Religion and folk tradition play a vital role in sustaining morale through these dark years. Churches across the plains hold emergency prayer services where congregations gather in dust-stained clothes to pray for rain and sing traditional hymns. Preachers debate whether the drought is a natural phenomenon or a divine judgment upon the land. Rainmakers set up wooden towers in county towns, firing mortars or burning chemicals to induce rain. They charge desperate farmers for promises that never materialize. Yet, despite false promises, the community holds together, sharing what little food and water remains. April of 1935 brought the catastrophic climax of the Dust Bowl crisis during the legendary event known as Black Sunday. On April 14, after a mild morning, The largest black blizzard ever recorded swept across the Great Plains, carrying an estimated 300 million tons of topsoil. The storm produced absolute darkness for over 5 hours, disorienting travelers, trapping families in cellars, and convincing thousands that the end of the world had arrived. In the immediate aftermath, reporter Robert Jiger coined the term Dust Bowl, a name that would forever define the region in American memory. Out of this environmental ruin came a fundamental revolution in how the United States managed its land. Recognizing that improper farming practices exacerbated the drought, the federal government established the Soil Conservation Service under Hugh Hammond Bennett. The agency launched rehabilitation programs across the plains, purchasing millions of acres of ruined farmland to create national grasslands. They planted thousands of miles of tree windbreaks known as the Great Plains Shelter Belt, and taught farmers techniques like contour plowing and stubble mulching to lock soil in place. Though these measures stabilized the land, true relief arrived in the autumn of 1939 when heavy rains broke the drought. Today, many original homestead farmhouses of the Dust Bowl have long since disappeared. Their timber framing collapsed into decay and buried beneath recovering sod. Wooden fences have rotted away, and the open prairie has returned to vast expanses of pasture and irrigated fields anchored by deep groundwater. Yet, if one walks remote dirt roads in Cimarron County today, stone foundations, rusty iron plowshares, and silent windmills still stand against the vast sky. They remain silent monuments to an era when human ambition clashed with nature, and a generation of farm families endured the dark winds of the earth to keep their homes alive.